Well, hello and a very warm welcome to our Parent Talk webinar, where the focus is going to be on supporting your child's emotional well-being on their return to full-time school. So this is the second session in the series. The first one happened a couple of weeks ago. So if you want to catch up on that first session, if you haven't seen it already, the recording is available on our website. So I'm really pleased to welcome back Kate to us, who's an education psychologist in Conway. Today's session is going to be really interesting, really practical, and hopefully very reassuring for you, because we know that the next couple of weeks is going to be quite significant for us as parents, with the children going back to school, not only after 6 weeks over the summer break, but after closer to 6 months really since the beginning of lockdown. So there's lots to think about, and we all want to be able to support our children as best we can with their emotional well-being in that situation.
Hello, hi, I'm Kate Swindon. As Deborah said, I work as an educational psychologist across schools in Conway. So today it's the second session, and this time we're going to be talking about helping children to talk about their feelings. A very short bit on resilience, and then a little bit about how to talk to children about loss and bereavement. I just want to sort of go back to the last session for one slide where we talked about how important it is to look after yourself in order to be able to look after children. We talked a lot about how our emotions can be passed on to those that depend upon us, and some ways that we can try to prevent that from happening. So when we're feeling anxious, so that if we're feeling really anxious, we're not passing that on to our children. So first of all, really, we need to know when we're becoming overloaded. We need to know when we need to take a break. And we also need to know who the people are who we can call on to support us. When we're anxious, it can sometimes come across as being cross, maybe over things that are quite small really, and maybe directed, for example, at the school and things that the school has or hasn't done. It's good to be aware of this and try to be flexible, particularly around the return to school and particularly when in front of children, just to try and help them to manage their own anxiety. So notice when you're feeling anxious or when you're feeling cross, and ask for help. Phone a friend and have a rant when you need it, out of the company of the children. Also, if you don't manage to do this perfectly every time, be self-compassionate. Give yourself a break. We aren't perfect, and it's okay to make mistakes. Try and do something nice for yourself. So we're going to start talking about how to talk to children about their feelings. PACE is a well-developed model that you can look up online if you want to find out more about it after listening to this. It's a way of communicating with children behaving that aims to make children feel safe. So the P in PACE stands for playful, which is about creating an atmosphere of lightness and fun. So you're using a light tone in your voice, like you might do if you were storytelling, and you're having fun and expressing joy, really. A stands for acceptance. If we understand that behaviour is a way of communicating feelings, then we can accept how children are feeling. And accepting their feelings does not mean accepting potentially harmful behaviour. It's about understanding what they're trying to tell you with this behaviour without judging them. So So you can disapprove of the behaviour. It's good to have boundaries and to tell children, well, that behaviour is not acceptable. But to try and understand why they're behaving in that way, which brings us on to C, which stands for curiosity. So when a child is acting in a certain way, or even just when they're playing or whatever they're doing, we want to be thinking, I wonder. And this can help us to think about the meaning behind that behaviour. By showing the children that we're curious, we let them know that we want to understand them. So I wonder if, or what do you think was going on? What do you think that was about? Instead of, why did you do that? There's a difference there. The why did you do that sounds a little bit judgmental, whereas if you're sort of saying, what do you think was going on? You're more interested and curious about their inner life, really. Children often know when their behaviour is unacceptable. They often know when their behaviour is inappropriate, but they might not know why they did something, or they might feel very uncomfortable about talking to an adult about it. But you can make guesses about what a child may be thinking and feeling. So you might say something like, I wonder if you were thinking that it was unfair, or almost you can have a conversation with yourself. So you're not really expecting a response from the child, but you're almost talking to yourself. I wonder if you were thinking that was unfair, and that's what made you hit out, or whatever it is. So our being curious in that way can actually help them to start to work out why they do certain things, and also improve their communication, which hopefully in the long term will lessen the behaviour. Being curious, I think when you're being curious, it's okay to be sad about the behaviour rather than angry, because what anger does is it shuts down communication. You're more likely to get a response from the child when anger's not used. So it's a quiet, accepting tone that conveys a simple desire to understand the child. Empathy, which is the E in PACE, is about letting the child know that you are there with them when they are feeling sad, scared, or in distress. Together, you will get through it. Okay, so we're just going to watch a quick video about empathy.
So what is empathy, and why is it very different than sympathy? Empathy, it's very interesting. Teresa Wiseman is a nursing scholar who studied professions, very diverse professions where empathy is relevant, and came up with 4 qualities of empathy. Perspective taking, the ability to take the perspective of another person or recognize their perspective as their truth. Staying out of judgment, not easy when you enjoy it as much as most of us do. Recognizing emotion in other people and then communicating that. Empathy is feeling with people. And to me, I always think of empathy as this kind of sacred space when someone's kind of in a deep hole and they shout out from the bottom and they say, I'm stuck, it's dark, I'm overwhelmed. And then we look and we say, hey, you climb down. I know what it's like down here, and you're not alone. Sympathy is, ooh, it's bad, no, you want a sandwich? Empathy is a choice, and it's a vulnerable choice, because in order to connect with you, I have to connect with something in myself that knows that feeling. Rarely, if ever, does an empathic response begin with at least. And we do it all the time, because you know what? Someone just shared something with us that's incredibly painful, and we're trying to silver lining it. I don't think that's a verb, but I'm using it as one. We're trying to put the silver lining around it. So, I had a miscarriage. Oh, At least you know you can get pregnant. I think my marriage is falling apart. At least you have a marriage. John's getting kicked out of school. At least Sarah is an A student. But one of the things we do sometimes in the face of very difficult conversations is we try to make things better. If I share something with you that's very difficult, I'd rather you say, I don't even know what to say right now, I'm just so glad you told me. Because the truth is, rarely can a response make something better. What makes something better is connection.
I love that video. I just think that's such a lovely story about empathy and understanding of what empathy is. So I think one of the things to take from that is that we don't need to make children talk to us. What we want to do is create opportunities for them to talk in a safe, non-judgmental, empathic space. We don't need to make everything better. What we should be looking to is to make children feel understood. So a good way to get children to talk sometimes or to develop that space is just by doing something together. It might be time drawing together is a really nice thing, or some other activity that you can enjoy together. Going for a walk is a good thing. And also actually saying it's bedtime always works in my house. That's when my child particularly likes to start to have a talk. But it's about, turning off your phone, turning off the telly, being right there with your child and finding an activity that can help them get to the right level of calmness. And also if you're drawing together, what that does is it takes some of the intensity out of it as well. So the child's not having to make eye contact, they're not having to look at you all the time while you're talking. And sometimes that can really help them to open up. So it's important that children and adults know that what they are feeling is understandable and it is okay, even though you might not agree with what they're saying. So like we saw in the empathy video, we should really be trying to avoid dismissing or minimizing what the child is feeling. We dismiss the way someone's feeling when we start our conversation when we start what we're saying with, don't be silly. That's called invalidation. Or when you say, you're making a mountain out of a molehill, that would be where we're minimizing what they have said. Instead, we can try something like, I can see you're upset. I can understand why you feel that way. This is a tough situation. You're not agreeing necessarily with what they're saying, but you are saying you can understand that they feel that way. So, and sometimes we have to be very careful not to accept what they're saying as correct if it isn't. Validating doesn't mean that you accept what the child is saying, only what they're feeling. So if a child says they're scared they're going to get ill if they go to school, you can say, I understand that. It's been a worrying time. What can we do to help you feel safe? Shall we look at our social story? Shall we use the calm box that we talked about last time? Should we ask the teacher? It can be helpful as well to normalise feelings, because lots of children will be feeling anxious about going to school. It's a normal reaction to change in routine. Normalising feelings means to let the children know that the emotions they experience are normal and valid, and this can be done by talking about them. So, for example, can I have a look at 2 responses and see whether they're validating or not? So, little girl or little boy comes in, Bobby lost my pencil, I hate him, he's a bad brother. So you can say, stop being silly, let's get you another pencil. This is not a validating response. This is minimizing, this is invalidating. You could say, what a naughty boy, you must be fuming. Now that's a validating response, but it's also agreeing with what the child's saying, even though we know that's not necessarily the case. So you want to be trying something like, you you're feeling really cross. This must be really important to you. And then you can move on to some problem solving from there. So validate how the child is feeling, but not the unacceptable behaviour or the kind of wrong conclusions that have been drawn. Something that we talk a lot about in psychology and is resilience. When something bad happens, some people find it hard to bounce back and feel deflated, where others find it easier to dust themselves off and bounce back, a bit like Tigger. And that bounce back ability is resilience. I mean, some people may have that resilience sometimes and not at other times. There can be lots of factors that will affect how resilient you're feeling. So resilience is a person's ability to bounce back after a difficult experience or event. It's the ability to cope with or adapt to stress brought on by difficult life events. But resilience is a learned skill. Parents and caregivers play a key role in the development and nurturing of resilience in children. So we're just going to cover this really quickly because this really could be a whole session on its own. But we're going to have a look at one of a few models of resilience, which is this one. These are the building blocks of resilience. To support children to build up their resilience, it's important that, obviously, in the first place, basic needs are met, such as getting plenty of exercise and fresh air, plenty of sleep, enough leisure time, feeling safe and having a healthy, balanced diet. Then we can focus on the 5 building blocks of resilience. So number 1, security, sense of safety. We can help children to feel comfortable and safe by having them know that they have adults in their life that they can depend upon. Talk honestly about the return to school. Check out the school website and look at pictures of school layout and classrooms if they're still available, so that they can feel quite secure and safe about where they're going. Talk about how school are going to keep them safe. Then, another important factor in developing resilience is your sense of self. Helping children to develop a sense of self and knowing who they are. You can do this by nurturing their interests, helping to identify and name their strengths, all about me activities that school do this at the beginning of every year in primary school pretty much. But you can do that at home as well. You know, what I like, what's my favourite food, all these things that add to our sense of self. Number 3 is the sense of belonging, and this is a really important one. Children feel respected and appreciated if they have a sense of belonging. So it's really important that you're focusing on relationships and connections that the child has in their life, whether it be family or friends or the person at the shop or, you know, any of those connections that they have that might be important to them. And I'm going to show you an activity in a bit that can help with that. The last 2 are mission and competence. And really, that's about having a sense of purpose, a sense that what you're doing is meaningful, and a sense that you're quite good at it. So capability, that you are competent. You can give a child a sense of purpose and responsibility by giving them things to do, small jobs around the house, or giving them tasks to do to prepare for going back to school, such as getting the bags ready, getting their uniform ready, giving them, helping them to give something back, helping them to do something kind for somebody next door or other kindnesses. And make sure that you give them jobs that you know that they're good at, where they're going to succeed, so that they can feel competent. We talked about the 5 ways to well-being last time, and how a lot of these are, this 5 ways to well-being is being used in all schools across Conway. So we just mapped a few activities to the 5 ways to well-being, because these really do hook into that sense of resilience. You know, so if you look like connection, that can be like just spending some time together, having a film night, being in contact with friends and family, being active, obviously, learning together, watching a documentary, doing some baking, doing a new activity or playing a new game, taking notice of things, going for a walk, noticing others being kind and telling them, and giving. Doing a random act of kindness, taking someone a cup of tea, giving things to the charity shop, or even just volunteering to help with the washing up, which would be a first in our house. But all of these things really help build resilience. So this is a really nice activity that you can do. It's a fun, practical sort of activity. You can do a collage or a drawing or however you'd want to do it. You could do it as a one-off, or you could do it as a project over years even, because it could be changed and built on, etc. So it's each part of the tree has a different meaning, and it's good to give children the freedom to add what they want to each part. You might want to do a tree each, or you might want to do it as like a family. But obviously you've got the roots, that's your family, the ground, which might be any community activities that they're involved in, or the sorts of things that you've been doing during lockdown to help you through. Your trunk, you would put some of the skills that you've learned. You can specifically do this for the lockdown period, so anything that's happened during lockdown there. Branches are hopes and dreams and wishes. Leaves are the important people in your life, and you can keep adding to that. And fruits are the gifts and special moments. So, you know, if there are those, I know it's been a tough time during lockdown, but maybe there was that afternoon or that day where, you know, something really special happened that you want to keep as a memory on your tree. Another activity that's really nice to feed into that resilience and to get that sense of self and get that sense that you've had a journey together through this time might be to make a COVID time capsule. So it might be something where you might put in any pictures or rainbow pictures, maybe write a poem, or a nice idea is to write a little letter to your future self about what this time in lockdown has been like, or any special memories or photographs that you could put in a little capsule, a little box, sellotape it up and put it away until a future date to get out and have a look at. And that will be a treat when you go to look back at it. Some other sort of practical ideas for helping children to cope with their emotions, particularly if they're worried about going back to school. One idea is to set a worry time. So have a particular time each day or week to talk about your worries. So it might just be for 10 minutes and there might not be any to talk about. But one of the things that you can do to help with that is have something like a worry jar or a worry box or whatever you want it to be. So that sits there throughout the day, and during the day, if there are any things that seem like big worries or small worries, write it down on a piece of paper or draw it or whatever you want to do and stick it into the worry jar. You're then going to open that at worry time, which on this jar is 4:15 to 4:30, and you would talk through them there, and some of them will no longer be a worry, so we can chuck those away, and some of them we can use what we've talked about before about validation and understanding that the child is worried, not necessarily looking to make it better, unless you can do some problem solving together quite easily. And the third one there, we've got the worry monster. So we can feed those worries to the worry monster, write them down, stick them in there, and the worry monster will eat them up. Okay, so obviously we could talk about grief and loss for a full session, I think, but we wanted to include this just because I think loss in particular has been a big part of this lockdown period. Even if we haven't actually lost a member of the family, there have been lots of other losses of friendships and time with family members, etc. Freedom, yes, definitely. So we're just going to quickly look at a couple of ways of understanding loss, and then we'll talk a little bit about children's understanding of loss. So it used to be that we talked about loss as being when we're bereaved, that we go through a stage by stage kind of process of grieving. So first denial, then anger, then etc., etc. Nowadays, we don't tend to talk about that as a set. You feel this, then you feel this, then you feel this, then you feel this. Nowadays, there's more of a understanding that it's a bit more chaotic than that. And actually, we may be coming like this spiral of grief. We may be coming out of a dark hole, but those feelings of guilt, fear, shock, denial, and some periods of feeling happy can all happen in any order, actually. And sometimes you might go back to the beginning on a certain day, and sometimes, so there's a lot of chaos and a lot of spiraling until we hopefully eventually adjust. But even then, we may sometimes fall back into that spiral and have some of those initial feelings. So lots of ups and downs. We might be okay one day but not okay the next, and that's going to be the same for children, obviously. This model of grief has been suggested as maybe a better representation than that stage. So the grief of a loss never actually leaves the person completely, but it does change over time. If we imagine that grief, when it starts off, may be huge and overwhelming, and so this little pain button gets pressed often because there's nowhere for that grief to go, so it's often bouncing on that pain button. Over time, the ball starts to shrink. It might get a little bit bigger at times, but it starts to shrink. You still go through life and the grief ball still moves around inside the box, but because the ball has gotten smaller, when it does hit, it hits it less often, that pain button. It still delivers the same amount of pain, no matter what the size of the ball, but it's less often and can be quite random and sometimes unexpected. As time passes, the ball continues to shrink with it and our grief for the loss we have experienced. The ball might not hit the pain button as often, giving people more time to recover in between each hit. It gives us time to heal and to begin to remember the person as they were in life. So children and young people will have similar feelings to adults following a death or a loss, but often express their feelings in a different way, depending on their developmental age. Prior to being 2 years old, then a child's infant or a toddler's, an infant's response to grief is going to be pretty much dependent upon the adult's response at that point. From 2 to 5 years old, and this is only an estimate, so the 2 to 5 years old is not set in stone. Children develop at different rates. But from 2 to 5, children, I've talked about this last time, about the magical thinking that children can be involved in. So sometimes they may feel that something they did cause the death, or they may feel that they could somehow reverse that death if only they were good enough, or if only they did certain things. Then if they ate all of their greens, then maybe Granny would come back. But the reactions that you might see would be loud protests, sleep problems, and on all of these levels maybe reverting back to being more babyish in their behaviour, and maybe concerned about separation and abandonment, because what if you go away and you don't come back? From 5 to 11 years old, they'll have been more exposure to death and more of an understanding of death as permanent, although that can still be quite a difficult concept to fully get hold of. And when children are over 11 years old, then they are likely to understand that death is permanent. So there's no right or wrong way to grieve, and it's important to allow children and young people to grieve in their own way and their own time. They might seesaw in and out of grief, needing time to play and have fun as well as cry, and that can be difficult as adults sometimes, especially if we're grieving ourselves, that children can sort of bounce up and down in and out of their grief. But as we say, there's no right or wrong way to grieve. So, advice for supporting children through loss. First of all, it's important to listen to what your child has to say, and to normalise how they might be feeling. Sometimes children may just need a sort of silent, supportive space that will give them the opportunity to process their feelings and just sit with them, as long as they know that you're there for them. So sometimes just sitting quietly and sharing the space will be enough. Talk to children honestly. Talk to them about facts and emotions. Consider their age and level of understanding, but discussing the situation will be an ongoing conversation. Be reassuring and give them clear and accurate information about what has happened and what may happen next, for example, funeral arrangements. Accept how they're feeling and encourage them to talk about their thoughts and feelings. Don't make promises. I think this is about reassuring them that they're loved and supported, but trying not to make promises. For example, Granny will be fine when Granny's very poorly. Be open and honest and tell them it's okay not to know the answers, and that you don't know all of the answers to some of the questions they might have. It's better to be honest about that. Try to keep to a routine. It can really help to have some structure when normal lives feel disrupted. So try to have regular meal times, schoolwork, breaks, playtime, etc. And school as well. And don't be hard on yourself. Give yourself a break and try not to set unrealistic goals. Give children choices so that they can decide what they're doing, as this will help them to feel like they have a sense of control over their lives when maybe everything seems out of control. And that's, it feels like a really rushed talk through some really important subjects there. But
I think that's been really, really helpful actually. And it's just given us lots to think about and places where we can go get more information as well. So thank you ever so much. It's been really, really interesting.
Can I just say, Deborah, just this last link on this last page is a really useful social story, school story that you can access, which has been updated to be relevant to the children going back in September.
Brilliant, thank you. So we've got a couple of questions that have come through. One of them actually is about something that's been quite big in the headlines over the last week or so, and it's around wearing masks in school, in the secondary schools, I believe, in Wales. And if your child's feeling a bit anxious about that, how would you go about reassuring them and helping them with that situation?
I think first of all, we have to recognise that the fear of wearing the masks may be part of a bigger anxiety. It may be just one part of the anxiety that's, we talked about it's okay not to be okay. It's a normal response to change like this, that there are going to be anxieties, and sometimes they do come out in this way. But I think one possible course of action would be to start to try and do some gradual exposure. So maybe you might practice putting the mask on for short amounts of time and then sort of building it up for longer amounts of time, so that the child feels ready to go into school in the mask. Also reassuring them that obviously they only have to wear the mask at outside the classroom. It's not going to be all day sort of thing. I think we go back to what we've been saying throughout the session, in that we need to show that we understand that it's an anxious time, and that there are lots of things that how the child feels is valid, and maybe just leave it there and talk, allow them to see how it goes. When they get there, allow them to feel understood, so that they are more ready to see how it goes when it comes to actually going back to school. But if you have a good enough, I find as a parent that sometimes if I try and step in with a situation like that, and I started saying, okay, we've got to try putting the mask on, and then my child is more likely to overreact to me trying to do that than if I was doing therapy with with somebody else's child, in which case they would probably go, yes, this is not as bad as I thought. So, it's a difficult thing being a parent. We can't always solve everything. I think if we can be understanding, then that's help the child feel understood, then that goes a lot further than you might think.
Yeah, that empathy goes a long way, doesn't it?
Yes, yeah, it really does.
And then the other question that we have really is around just a parent who is really keen to put these things into practice and to try out the different things that you've been talking about, but is just worried about getting it wrong. And what would you advise on that? Well,
I would say be compassionate to yourself. We don't have to be perfect, and it's okay to get it wrong and make mistakes. And especially if you can get it wrong and share with your child how you've got it wrong, and etc., then that's a learning opportunity. You're not going to, with anything that we've talked about, you're not going to do your child any harm. We're not trying to deliver therapy. We're just trying to use some techniques to help them to manage their emotions a bit better, and I think have a go. And also, it's not, different things will work for different people. Not everything is going to work for every parent-child relationship. Like I've already said, like I'm a psychologist. My son's fully aware that I am, so he's not having any of it. It's not going to work in every parent-child relationship, and it doesn't mean it's a better or worse relationship. It's just, but I think if we could be aware of our own emotions, if we can be validating how the child feels, avoiding anger, I think that's going to go a long way.
And what I like about what you've shared is that it is very, it's not rocket science, is it?
No.
A lot of it is around just that's the foundation of that relationship with your child,
yeah.
Spending time with them,
which
actually isn't always an easy thing, is it? When life is busy, but actually just spending time with your child and having that good, strong foundation helps, doesn't it?
And I think one of the messages is in this as well is like taking the pressure off yourself to feel like you have to make things better. Actually, it's the relationship that really counts. It's the spending time, as you say. You don't have to be delivering therapy. You know, it's that the relationship is the most important thing. So don't feel you have to solve every problem.
Brilliant. And that's about being kind to yourself, isn't it? And going back to what you said earlier about you can't pour from an empty cup. And there is support available for you as parents as well. So just as we bring the webinar to a close, I just want to quickly share some information about where you as a parent can get support as well. Because that's actually, it's so important, isn't it, that we have people that we can talk with and share with as well. So for more support as parents, we do have local family teams and family centres in Conwy, and you can get the information about those teams and how to get in touch with them on our website, conwy.gov.uk/family life. So please do get in touch if you want to talk through anything, just a listening ear, or if you want any help or advice as a parent, then please do get in touch with us. There's lots of interesting information on the website as well, short parenting video clips, etc. And then if you want any more support or advice about your child's education, then as a first port of call, of course, you can contact your child's school and have a chat with them, perhaps one of the pastoral people or the head teacher, about any concerns that you might have, or if it's something more around your child's educational needs, or any of the tips and resources that Kate's talked about this evening, then you can email Conwy ALN Advice 5@hubcymru.net, and anybody can email that address. It doesn't have to be only if your child is accessing ALN services from the school. And there's a team of us that look at those emails and figure out who's in the best place to support you as a family and what you need with that. So there's plenty more support out there for you as families. Please don't feel that you're on your own, and we're here to listen and help as well. So thank you ever so much, Kate. It's been really useful and very interesting, and I'll certainly be putting some of these things into practice over the next couple of weeks myself. So we'll stop the webinar there. Thank you ever so much for taking part as well. Thanks. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Cheers.